TorahCafe.com. Some philanthropists pride themselves on never saying no to a person or charity in need. On a winter day in December, one such man had just written a check for several $1,000s at a fundraising banquet. However, on the way home, in his limousine, a terrible phone call shattered his world. The Madoff scandal had just broken, and he found himself nearly penniless. His children's education, his retirement, all his money was gone. In the following days, he would have to reassess his finances and his future. And what of the generous check that he had written on that fateful evening? Is it ethical for the charity to cash the check, considering that it had been written based on a misunderstanding of his financial status? Moderated by Emmy Award-winning writer, humorist, and New York Times ethicist Randy Cohen at the Jewish Law Symposium. Balancing professional and personal ethics in challenging economic times. A panel of ethicists and acclaimed law professionals debated this question. The panel included the Honorable Catherine Sweeney Hayden, a judge in the U.S. District Court of New Jersey and adjunct professor at Seton Hall University School of Law. Professor John J. Farmer, Dean of Rutgers School of Law, former New Jersey Attorney General and Senior Counsel to the 9/11 Commission, and Rabbi Michael Broyd, Director of the Law and Religion Program at Emory University, and a member of the Beth Din of America.
Here's something that kept coming into me at the column after the Bernie Madoff case broke, which is I heard from a charity, and they went, someone made a donation, and earlier in that week, the Madoff case broke, and he found out, well, I don't have this money. I don't have any money. Should they give the money back? Should they?
Well, I remember how you answered. I think that's in the materials. I remember how you
here
answered
we're
it. But I just want to jump to the ending. You said there are times when the law trumps ethics. And
I could have sworn it was the other way around. That doesn't sound like me.
I swear, I think it's even in these materials. But anyway, the point was that the charity, as I recollect, was in a position where it really could not refund the money, albeit you took the position that absolutely, especially temporarily, how connected they were. This is not 6 months or 10 years later, that the money should be refunded.
And I think they found a way to do that, right? By hiring
well, the way my case played out was that I felt they should, and that time was a big factor. That it really was within 10 days. And you know, had the guy had a true understanding of his financial situation just a couple days earlier, he couldn't have written that check, and that they should give it back. If it had happened a month ago, I would have thought, well, that's life, we take our chances. But it turned out, at least the legal advice I was given, was that there was no mechanism for this charity to write an individual a check. That was what I believe the legal term for that was fraud, if they start just writing checks to people.
They could lose their charitable status if they start writing.
Yeah, well, they could also, this. So the solution they worked out, and I run updates in the column, and they're descriptive, they're not prescriptive. Sometimes by the time I get to answer something, events have moved forward. I'm just giving the news here. I'm not endorsing it or criticizing it. But they took the guy on as a consultant. And he performed legitimate work, valued at the extent of the money he'd written them. That's how they coped with it. But
I think that there's an underlining question here. It goes as follows. When I do something predicated on a certain set of facts that I believe to be correct, that turn out to in fact be substantially wrong, how is the world around me supposed to respond to my innocent mistake? And I don't think the time frame really matters. People have been getting statements from Madoff for decades that indicate they have a much higher net worth than they in fact do. It seems to me that certainly if I make a pledge to a charity predicated on my financial situation being X and it's really Y, I'm entitled to get out of my pledge because I made a pledge due to error. I made a mistake of fact.
Right.
I think that when I actually give money to a charity, though, whatever reason why I have in the back of my mind as to why I'm donating this activity, this money, it doesn't matter. No different than if I step into a restaurant and I order dinner. And the reason why I order this elaborate dinner with this fine bottle of champagne is because I think I have a lot of money in my Madoff account. And before the bill comes, the news breaks
Right.
That Madoff is a fraud. So I turn to the restaurant and I say, excuse me, I would not have ordered this dinner.
Right.
Had I been aware of my true financial condition. The restaurant correctly says to me, tough. Tough.
Right.
I don't think that a charity is any different in the following sense. Once you've actually provided the check, the errors that you made that induced you to provide the check, so long as the charity that you're giving it to didn't induce those errors. So if I made a donation to the Madoff Foundation based on my money in my Madoff account, I think I'm entitled to that money back forever. But I think that the money that I give to the American Jewish whatever, it doesn't matter, I'm not ever entitled to back simply because I made a mathematical miscalculation about what my net worth is. I was very uncomfortable, by the way, with the solution that you presented, which is they in essence did a bogus hire to avoid these requirements.
Again, I'm just giving the news here. I wasn't endorsing that.
But I'm not even blaming you. I found it very disconcerting that a charity would respond by saying, well, we can't refund them the money, so let's do a bogus hire, and that'll be okay.
Well, they didn't actually use the word bogus.
I understand. They didn't actually use the word bogus hire. But it didn't sound, if you'll excuse me, kosher.
If I could just pose a question. Last year, this is actually a story that happened in London. It was a tragic story, but someone on Purim, it's the tradition to give large amounts of money to charity, and there was a philanthropist in London that wrote $1 million worth of checks Purim evening to hundreds of different charities and people, representatives that came from different organizations. 36 hours later, he passed away in a tragic car accident. And the question came up to rabbis at the time. Well, charities holding these checks, is it ethical to cash these checks? Meaning, were these checks considered to be money having given by someone, or is it now an issue of the orphans and the estate and who has the right at this time to handle the money? I'd love to hear any input into a similar case dealing with what to do with the check at hand.
Once the checks are cashed, so if they're cashed before he passes away, then whoever cashes the checks gets to keep them. But the simple fact is, as a matter of Jewish law, a check is an agency to take money out from a bank. And the rule in Jewish law, like the rule in American law, is very straightforward. When you die, all the agencies you've provided, they die with you. And checks cannot be cashed as a matter of Jewish law if the signator on the check is deceased because the agency expired when the principal expired. I think that, by the way, that's the law in America as well, which is you can't cash checks from a deceased person off of a personal account because checks are an agency. Assuming they're not certified or a bank check or anything like that, the checks, if the principal dies, the agency expires, the check can no longer be cashed. That's certainly the view Jewish law takes on checks given. And so the lesson, of course, is when you get a check, what are you supposed to do? Run to the bank and cash it.
I was going to say, don't kill the guy, but yours is good too.
One of the things that we're veering into equity, aren't we? Talking about cases in equity or problems that lawyers would hit the books for the answer, using all of the tools of equity. One of the things that goes on that we never really hear about are the ways in which problems like these are resolved by lawyers negotiating with clients who trust them and telling them we can spend all this money on working this out, but what ultimately is fair. And you know, coming back to this whole topic that we have, our sense of what's right as our professional and personal lives become banged around by these tough times, with clients more desperate and cases more expensive, and lawyers running out of jobs real fast, and young lawyers coming out to a profession that's quite hostile to them because all that money that they spent on their degrees is not going to remunerate them. The special gift of lawyers is not only to be able to get through these tough times, but to sit in that room and take that story that you told, Rabbi, about the guy who suffered the auto accident, and figure out what to do. Are we going to go to the books and find 85 cases and line them up? Are we going to sit down, talk about the actual real life situation affecting the orphans, the charities, and so on, and work out a solution? That's why we love being lawyers. That's what judges love when you're able to settle a case, is everybody just puts it all down, puts it on the table, and tries to be fair. And that's the marriage of the ethics within and making the law work without.
I, for one, found that last statement by the judge to be a magnificent ending for a conversation about legal ethics. It's important to realize that there are magnificent endings that lawyers participate in that make the world a better place. And part of your duty as a lawyer is every opportunity you have to grab one of those, grab it.
I would say the great challenge facing legal education, I think, is, we're very good at producing people who can spot issues. But the harder thing is producing people who can solve problems. Mm-hmm. And the most successful lawyers are the ones who can solve problems, not just spot issues. And that's the challenge that we're trying to address at Rutgers.